We will begin shortly. Let me know if you guys can hear me fine and everything sounds good. We'll be starting in a couple minutes. We got 1 minute left. Hope you're ready. Hello, everybody. My name is William. I'm your friendly neighborhood counselor, and I'm so happy you can be with us today at the Washington Willis Institute. I'm so happy that we can kind of get together about this and really just take time out to enjoy what we have available for each other. I think this lunch segment is really important because of all of the different aspects that are going to be a part of this awareness. So, for those that you don't know, that today's talk is going to be about OCD. And what I love about it is that this is domestic violence awareness. And so it's not just a relational thing, it's also about the aspects of domestic violence. we usually think that there's like some negative, some positive. There's like this like abuser victim, and that's it. But in that span, there's a lot of things that happen in mental health that we don't really get to talk about. And I'm hoping that the Institute today can give you some revitalizing information that can help you think about not just the victim and the abuser, but just the understanding of what's happening in between that individually on both spectrums. One of my greatest rules is that mental health is a spectrum. So I can never say one thing is one thing. That's kind of the beauty and curse of mental health, is that we have the ability to have the spectrum of understanding language, of emotions, and behavior. But the inability to define it can lead us astray sometimes. And so I'm hoping to give some clarity that will kind of give us that sense of security as far as talking about this. And so for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I want to talk about the relationship between domestic violence and OCD. Why? Well, the problem is that we don't really get to discuss what's important in between. We usually see the justice side of it. You have the victim, the perp. You don't really get to actually see what's happening in between individually on each spectrum. And I'm hoping to touch on that. Also, I was asked to talk about. I was asked to talk about. This is going to be a little difficult. So about harm OCD. No one really talks about this, and unfortunately, this is something that I don't like to bring up personally, because it makes people feel kind of awkward at times, because they may deal with this more than they realize. And unfortunately, our society today does not give room for this. We're literally doing this social media wise, and I don't like to talk about it too much when it's heavily happening, but we're gonna do it. So, so before I get started with anything, last week we talked about domestic violence and how violence can be done in multiple ways: physically, emotionally, socially, relationally, financially. There's different ways of causing domestic violence. We're going to talk about the OCD part of this now. So for those of you that do not know, OCD means obsessive compulsive disorder. This is what I would consider something that is in the cognitive behavioral therapy side. So what is cognitive behavioral therapy? To keep it short, the way that I think, cognitive, affects the way I feel, which changes the way I act. So if the way I think is distorted or irrational, it's going to distort and change the way that I should feel about something, which means that my actions will not always align with what's healthy. So the way I think affects the way I feel, which changes the way I do. So the way I think affects the way I feel, which changes the way I do. And so that is really important to understand it. That's on like the base level, which I would explain to anybody. So people that have been diagnosed with OCD, it's because they lack an understanding that focuses on the rituals that they use. So someone that has OCD, it's not just about like checking the lock 8 times to make sure you did it right. The point is that your self-understanding is so obsessive. You don't trust what you're thinking so much that you have to create a ritual to validate its existence. So that's why someone might lock the door 8 times, because they don't trust their thought, their initial thought or their prior thought, or they don't take time to actually validate what they're actually thinking, and they have to believe in rituals in order to validate their thought. So the excessive thinking about what's happening so much that you actually lose the reality of what you actually have to do. So it's a type of anxiety disorder, right? And it's a very serious condition, and it makes the victim or the client have a moment of fear in the way that it actually controls their life. So a lot of times, most common OCDs are need for constant reassurance, fear of harming a relative or a friend, the fear of thinking evil or sinful thoughts. You think about certain words or images or sounds or numbers all the time. It's just consistently, it's intrusive thoughts. So it's just intrusive, they're unwanted. You feel held captive by these thoughts, and you're just over it just completely just mentally just bombards you. And what happens is it makes you have to create these rituals, these compulsive, right? These compulsive rituals to make yourself feel like you've ended it or you completed it. Um, and so usually you do those rituals over several times. And you create these rituals because you think that you are validating the excessive thinking. So, um, people that have OCD are very, unfortunately, they're always overthinking, obsessively thinking. They are typically in a place where they feel like their thoughts will never be enough or they won't go away. Some type of compulsions, right? Though in the C and the D, right? So for the C, the compulsive part, some of the compulsions are repetitive cleaning. You're seeking some type of approval. You're arranging or ordering things in a certain way. You might save containers or newspapers. A lot of times, what happens is um, actually you let's see. The best way to put it is okay. How about you on TV? You watch hoarders. A lot of them have OCD. Um, you might have repetitive actions such as like sitting down and getting up from a chair, or like when you're walking away, you might always touch something, just to like make sure like, hey, it's on. Even though I see the light there, it's still on. Um, there is no proven history, or like there's no research on like what actually causes OCD, right? Um, I think a lot of experts talked about reduced serotonin levels in the brain might cause that condition. Um, Also, it stems from habits learned over time through someone's environment. So this could be an environmental health situation. I love the wellness wheel, and environmental health is one of my biggest favorite categories. I believe that our environment truly creates our mental health. But there's more than that, so I can't say that's the one set all. Um, so I hope we kind of have a good understanding of that. As far as treatment is concerned, what I'd highly recommend is obviously seeing a psychotherapist, and you focus on cognitive behavioral therapy. That's the biggest one. Also, medication is always a great thing. I am not a prescriber, nor do I give out medication, but I do find medication helpful for people that have been diagnosed. Um, and you deal with every obsession, and you understand the meaning of that obsession. You understand the ritual and the meaning of that ritual, and you try to create a level of understanding that makes you understand why do you feel powerless to this obsessive thinking. Um, and so I think that if you are someone that has obsessive thinking about things and you're afraid to express that, you should definitely seek help. Okay. Now that we have that done, right? Let's get on to it. So, this is a specific focus. This is harm OCD. Okay, so this is not something that you can diagnose, right? They would just say OCD, and then I might put in like a secondary thing, or I might put on a note like focus on subset HOCD. So harm OCD. Okay, so remember, OCD, you have obsessive thoughts. Remember we talked about that, right? So you have obsessive thinking that becomes intrusive or unwanted. And then we make a ritual, the compulsive part, to validate that, even though it's not really getting rid of those obsessive thoughts. Okay? With harm OCD, you might fantasize about cutting somebody off. You might at a stop sign because they were rude to you, Or you might have you're in a gas station, and someone always standing at the gas station talking to you crazy, and you just think like, what if I just hit them and just got it over with? And you just kept thinking about it. And the thing is that you actually fear the thought of you having to do something to somebody else. Hear me out. This is very, very, very important. Um, you're having unwanted thoughts about hurting someone, and you can't dismiss it. Normally, you get mad at somebody, you have road rage, and you're like, that messed up my day. But someone that has harm OCD, um, it makes the person feel like they can't trust their own mind. Um, so, whereas someone without OCD, they will have a violent thought and be like, oh, it's just a thought. Someone with harm OCD, they worry that that thought is somehow meaningful. So they want full assurance that they won't act on the thought. So people that have harm OCD, they might have aggressive thoughts, and see images of violence in their mind that worries that they'll actually carry it out. They might set themselves or fixate themselves on the idea. They could be responsible, or they're worrying about like running someone over by accident and then leaving the scene because like they keep thinking about what they could be doing to somebody else, right? And so they're terrified that they'll hurt somebody on impulse, intentionally or not. And also they have obsessive thinking that it's kind of like Joe in a sense, except it's a little different, where they feel like they're hiding their true nature from themselves. Like, I just gotta get it out of me. I just gotta get it out. I just gotta, but I can't show anybody, so I have to hide my true feeling, and that they're like a vicious, aggressive person who will act out someday if they lose control. So they're always worried about what they're going to become if it comes down to it. And so sometimes what they'll do actually is they will actually they'll hide dangerous objects. They will avoid watching news or violent movies to keep them not triggered by violent events. They'll compulsively pray or carrying spiritual items so they won't lose control. They often think that that they'll harm other people, and they'll also question themselves to make sure that they're not capable of injuring anyone. So, you know, from my clinical opinion, I believe exposure therapy would be a good start, because exposure therapy allows them to let go of the fear of being exposed by other people. And because they are not expressing themselves accurately and appropriately, having a space where they can feel accepted for how they feel is a really good start. I think with harm OCD, how this now relates to media, I think a lot of people today are instead of actually being avoidant of the possible triggers that might cause them, I feel like people are actually looking for the next problem, right? They want to be validated about how they feel about their dysphoric world so much that they'll look for the next problem. And if they know that they can follow a bandwagon that fits the description of their own dysphoric feeling, they'll go into it in a way that validates the obsessive thinking, which then helps them looking for it, looking for a problem, looking for someone to vilify, or looking for somebody. They'll be like, I can't watch that anymore because it's this, it's that, it's bad, it's this. They're looking for it. So that's actually their ritual. So you're actually looking for your ritual in the process of finding who is aligned with me and not, who's aligned with me or not. So you're going and you're looking for people like who are the bad seeds, who are the ones. See, I told you this is why I'm like this. This is why I'm like this. Although it's correct, and you do have to acknowledge the people that are for you and against you. If you're looking for the problem, if you're looking for the issue, if you're consistently obsessed and you're compulsively looking for media or entertainment that is actually trying to align the vilifying experience that you're experiencing within yourself, then that is completely unhealthy. Um, Many times we don't consider the fact that there is a level of harm with obsessive thinking. Um, I was asked, if you have any questions, please state any questions that you may need. Um, I'm more than happy to answer any questions as well while I'm speaking. Um, the next thing I want to talk about, this is not a diagnosing thing, but I think it's important to acknowledge it. Um, there is a, um, let's see. Well, first of all, we talked about OCD, right? Excessive thinking, the compulsive ritualistic behavior to validate this obsessive thinking that you aren't being validated by. And then we talked about harm OCD, which is when you're worried that your obsessive thinking about harming actually makes you more worried. And then there is this new thing coming out. It's not really been like, it's not DSM, right? It's not something I can clinically diagnose, but this is something that is being discussed. They call it homosexual OCD, or sexual orientation OCD, or SO OCD. You can look it up. The thing about it is that there are many people that are just poorly understood. So I don't know if people know this or not, but in the mental health, we all have communities, right? So you have like a schizophrenic community, you have a bipolar community, you have an anxiety disorder community, you have OCD community, right? And you have ADHD communities. And in those communities, you have subset communities. And they all have their own languages, they have their own behaviors, their own culture. They're all different, right? And so, me being a therapist or being a healer, I'm in the middle of all this. And so, I have to go to each community and understand what's happening in each subcategory as well. And so, this is more of a recent thing. HOCD or SOOCD. So outside of the OCD community, it's not understood at all. And a lot of times, people say, "Oh, he doesn't like gay people, so he's probably gay himself," or they make statements like that. Oh, they're so against it that they're probably gay themselves, or and so that's why a lot of the people in the OCD community don't really kind of interact. They have their own community, because a lot of times many people think that it's repressed homosexuality. Not the case. And so they think it's part of the coming out process. It's not just part of the coming out, it's actually a subtype of OCD. And a lot of people will not talk about it because they don't have the language or the space to be inclusive about it. HOCD or SOOCD can affect any sexual orientation. So there are actually a lot of straight people that actually have obsessions about being gay, but because of the stigma against the community, the LGBTQA plus community, it's hard to create this inclusion because of so much stigma that's around it. And so it's completely unfair for people to try to find themselves as they're developing and they're processing themselves. And so why do we have to create an open community about this, right? And it's also why it's important that we have these different communities as well. So people that have HOCD or SOCD, they're very preoccupied with their level of arousal. I believe that many times they will diminish the attraction to opposite sex. They will have intrusive thoughts about themselves and sexual conduct. They always try to have a positive reaction to a member of the same sex as evidence of being gay. A lot of times it's always this versus mindset. So like they try to like figure out, like this level of intrusive thought without actually being presented as. Very weird language, right? It's very weird language because it's very sensitive. So they have difficulty setting aside thoughts about their own sexual orientation. They can't actually just exist because the excessive thinking, remember, and it's creating this compulsive mindset. So they might look at pornography, but it's the opportunity to check on the responses and reactions of other people. So it's like, and they always feel like it's like urgency. They need to decide, what am I? What am I? What am I? And it's like this aggressiveness that's really internalizing. So it's that obsessive intrusive thought. Um, and so a lot of times with the obsessive thought, um, there is they go back and they sometimes over sensualize their experiences as a child. Um, so like they might wonder like, where aren't these thoughts ever going to go away? Or am I thinking about this because of what happened in football practice when I was changing in front of everybody? Or, and they're like these over compromising thoughts that make them question their existence as an individual. And a lot of times we deal with this in the community, in the OCD community. A lot of straight men are actually going to counseling because of these intrusive thoughts, and they don't know how they feel because of how they see themselves in media, how media is taking them. And a lot of times, especially, there's just this inability to have proper language for everyone. Um, there's a lot of anxiety, um, and there's always this need to actually claim yourself, claim yourself, claim yourself. And we're in a society right now that is making everybody have to choose a side right now. And the choosing of a side can decide your entire career or your fate or your existence with your own family and self or your own image that you've created that you've felt comfortable in. Um, so I find that mindfulness is actually a really good way to help with the anxiety and the obsessive intrusive thought processing of it all. Um, a lot of times we're stuck with who we think we should be because of what we went through, and a lot of times we're not taking the time out to actually expose ourselves of our actual over rationalization of things. Um, so there's almost a phobic onset to all of this, right? It's almost a phobic onset of self exposure, and it's an over analyzing and the repetition and the mental habits of it all create a level of uncertainty that causes the behavioral issues to occur or the compulsive issues to occur. Um, Make sure that I'm not speaking too fast. I hope I'm making sense. Um, some of the things that people might do um, is they might you get worried about the what if, the what if, the what if, the what if. And that's also a part of anxiety. So, like I said before, mental health is on a spectrum. So, yes, OCD is a thing, but there's also anxiety around that. And there's other types of disorders that can be around that. So, my best healing part about all this, um, it's important to understand that there is a level of exposure therapy that should happen for you. You should seek someone that specializes in exposure therapy. You should focus on finding somebody that focuses on cognitive behavioral therapy. You could start writing down what your intrusive thoughts are. Write them down on a piece of paper. Just look at it and mark it from like 1 to 10, 10 being the most honest, 1 being the least honest. How factual is this statement about your life? And see the numbers and just see, where do you see yourself? Where do you mark yourself? And why is it so high? Why is it so low? Why is this in the middle? And it's important to start creating a foundation of reality of what you're experiencing and what you may not be experiencing. Let's see here. I don't see your question, Satin. Let's see. Let's see here. I don't see it. If you can, try and type it again. I would love to answer it. I'm so sorry I don't see it. Um, Once again, I'm gonna go back to obsessive. Let's see. I might be able to pull something up too. Let's see here. Um, I think it's really important to discuss this because we found ourselves in media more than we want to. And I find that a lot of people, especially online, have been dealing with this obsessive compulsive behavior, right? You're not thinking of anything. You go online, you get these images, these perceived images, intrusive thoughts. You let go of it. You're thinking about it. Then you find something that hurts you. Well, you see other people that it hurt, and then you keep looking for it. And then before you know it, you see people actually making a change by actually like being aggressive about it. So then you have this aggressive compulsive behavior, and it felt good because you didn't feel like you were alone in your own mental health disorder. Well, that's what happens. It popularizes, it socializes, but it doesn't make anybody accountable for how they were attacking somebody or they were attacking themselves, right? And so I find a lot of times in social media, we tend to compulsively look for people. We continually look for things. We look for people. We look for things that may not always be accurate to what we're experiencing for ourselves. Which is why it's so important that you do find like your own community, but also is your community holding accountability for the health disorder that you have? That's a real thing. And we sometimes allow inclusivity to overwrite accountability at times. And so when it comes to a mental health disorder, the obsessive, unwanted thoughts, the ritual might be, I'm going to go back to this community and tell all about it and just go all the way in and let it trigger other people so that everybody does. I call it the beehive. They, hitting the beehive, because like once you hit that beehive, everyone starts buzzing, and then it gives you enough chaos to kind of put yourself in so you don't feel alone in that buzz. And so it's important to understand the even ritual like patterns that you create going online, looking for problems, looking for people that disrupt you. It's important to look for those things and look for those triggers. And if you do need to contact me, you can always email me at will, at wwillc.org, or you can inbox our Facebook, and it'll be sent to me somehow. It always does. But I hope that today this kind of gave you an understanding that if you have some of these behaviors, it doesn't mean you have OCD, but what it does mean is that you might have some behavioral patterns that are not conducive or healthy to how you're living your daily life. And the question came in. So is it possible to have intimacy OCD? But if so, how does one deal with that? Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked that. So, intimacy OCD is very much. I actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring on our sexologist Jay for our next talk coming up about this, because this is really good stuff. Because many times we have obsessive thinking where it actually blocks our ability to be intimate with another because of how we've been conditioned emotionally from parents or past relationships. And there is a lot of openness. So yes, thank you so much for saying that. There's so much, like that's a whole nother conversation, because we don't realize that the way that we love or make love or have relationships with other people is typically a reflection at times of either yourself or your upbringing or your conditioned environment. So one question I would have for you to start kind of working on is understanding, well, how do you want to be loved versus how you were taught to be loved? That's a great start. I'm definitely going to get Jay on that one. And if you also want to sign up with her, you can go onto our website, wwillc.org. You can go to meet our team. You can click on Jay, and they would be amazing for anyone that's experiencing intimacy OCD. Very much so. And as always, remember, with self-awareness comes emotional responsibility. And as always, be kind to yourself. Thank you.